Hello there, and welcome to another session solving tactics on chesstempo.com. This set is 1600 to 1700. There's a pin here. This knight covers the b6 square. The queen also covers the b6 square. Um, it's difficult to find a way in. Queen takes, pawn takes. If queen takes, bishop takes, this check. I don't have this check. So, yeah, difficult. I need to somehow reorganize my pieces. Or else make some real magic happen. What about bishop d1, trying to remove the defender of the c5 square? So bishop d1, and the knight goes back to b6 forced. But then after knight b6, there's queen c5 check. Queen c5 check, king b7. I can't pick up the knight just yet. So what about bishop d1, knight b6, and then a4? If bishop takes, and if knight takes, bishop takes, and the bishop has nowhere to go. So like I said, I need to reorganize my pieces. So bishop d1, knight b6, a4. And after a4 and black takes, bishop takes, queen check, king goes to c7, then I pick up the a7 pawn. So what's the best defense there? Bishop d1. Maybe he should just give me the knight. But then I'm coming into b6 real hard. Maybe it can't be survived. Alright, that doesn't pose a threat. Bishop takes, queen takes. I can play rook takes. Bishop takes, rook takes. Take with the rook. Mistakes made in this position. Queen takes a4. People are trying for rook b6 check. There are two problems with rook b6 check. The first problem is that it actually does nothing. Absolutely nothing. And the second problem is that the queen can take, bishop takes, and black is a rook up. So queen takes a4, Bad move. I did consider it though. It was definitely something that I considered, trying to remove the defenders of the b6 square, but the queen also defends. So, no good. And this is just people playing queen takes a4. I'm pretty certain it's just people giving up because they think there's some sort of dynamite move, some sort of bam. But this is pretty, I don't know, this is pretty dynamite. The threat, the threat is pretty big. What happens after a5? Well, now I can just take on b5. Yeah. Okay, next problem. Threatening queen h2 checkmate. So there's no quiet moves unless they cover queen h2 checkmate. So queen check, or bishop check, king g8 is forced. Let's say bishop takes f4, revealed check. Bishop takes f5, revealed check. The king can go to f7, the king can go to f8. If f7, I will have queen g7 check. So let's take a moment. Bishop g6 check, king g8 forced. Now if the bishop goes back to h5, the king can go back to h7, and that's a repetition. So I must take on f5, yeah. So bishop check, king g8, bishop takes f5 check from the rook on g1. Now king f7, queen check, king here, queen check, king here, rook check is mate. The king can go to f6. And then I guess queen f8 is mates. No, then the king goes to e5. Wait, so let's take a look at that. Check, king here, check, king here, check, king here. Huh. Bishop g6 check, king g8, bishop takes f6 check, king f7. I could also play bishop e6 check in that position. Bishop e6 check, and then go for mate. Is that better? So check, king g8, check, check, king g8, check, king f8 or king g7. If king f8, there's bishop, queen check, king f7, and then bishop takes e6 check would force the queen to sacrifice herself. But is there better? Bishop check, king g8, bishop takes check, king f8, queen check, king f7, and rook check. King f6, I can win the queen for free. But I feel like there should be a checkmate that I'm not seeing. So I figured out two ways to win the queen. But I'm trying to find a checkmate. Bishop check, king g8, bishop takes check. Is that forced? Bishop check. Must I take on f5? Is there a better way? If the bishop moves to any other square, the king can go back to h7, and I haven't improved the position. For example, bishop e8, bishop f7, bishop h5. None of these moves are good because the king can just go back to h7. So I think bishop f5 check is the move. So bishop check and then bishop f5 are the first two moves. I have no doubt about that. I'm very certain. So bishop check, king g8, check, and now he has two squares. He has f8 and he has f7, f8 and f7. So in the f8 line, there's queen h8 check, king f7, queen g8 check, king f6, f8, queen h8 check, king g7, king f7. There's also queen check here, king e7, king e7, and then what? Bishop check, king d8. No. So it goes, the king goes to f8, queen h8 check. The king has two squares, e7 or f7. If f7, I think the most I have is a queen win. It's really not. Bishop takes f5 check. I was very certain that that was going to be the second move. Wait a second. Bishop f7 double check. If king h7, then queen g7 mates. And if king takes f7, Not a quiet move. So there's no way to get the queen in. So bishop check, king here, rook g7 check, king e8. No, so check. If king f8, rook g7 check, king takes f7, queen takes checkmate, queen g7 checkmate. If double check here, king f8, rook check, king e7, rook e8 would win the queen. So takes, and now so I dismissed rook g7 check because of king e8. So it must be queen g7 check. After queen g7 check, king e8. There's queen check. King to e7. King e7, rook g7 check. King f6 is forced. I don't have to check on g8. I can check on h8, but again, that's just the queen win. So queen g7 check. King e8 is forced. Queen h8 or queen g8. Queen g8. King e7 or king d7. If king d7, rook g7 is mate, so king e7 is forced. And after king e7, rook g7 check, king f6. This leads to a queen win, but again, so queen h8, king e7, rook check, king f6, I win the queen. King g8, rook check, queen g8, king e7 is forced. And now if rook check, king f6, can I checkmate him on e5? I think I might. Queen check, king here, rook check, king f, rook check, queen check. No, but then after king goes to e5, after king e5, there's rook e7 check. Rook e7 check, rook takes e7, and queen takes e7 mate. So the line goes queen g8 check, king e7, rook check, king f6, queen check, queen f8 check, king e5, and then rook e7 check, rook takes e7, queen takes e7 mates. Ah, queen takes d6 is an immediate checkmate. Okay. This is what I saw. That was a difficult problem. Was that really just the first one? And I spent a hell of a long time on it, too. I'm sorry. Most common mistake is 2 bishop e8 check. Most common mistake is bishop e8 check. This doesn't really gain anything, because after here, you need to repeat the position. That's the point. You must repeat the position here. I'm not certain why the computer plays rook g2. Bishop g6 is definitely the only move there. Alright, next problem. So there's some weak light squares. I can see knight h4 threatening mate, and if pawn takes, I win the queen. How can he defend g2? So after knight h4, his knights can't come in to protect g2. Interesting. Knight h4, pawn takes, and then queen takes d3. Is g takes forced? What other moves could be made? Not king h1, no king moves work. No pawn moves work. No queen moves are saving. No rook moves are saving. No knight moves save. So, yeah, pawn takes is forced. 23 wrong moves in this position. The first one, knight f4. Most common mistake, knight f4. Probably because queen f3 saves. Yeah, here we go. Queen f3 is saving in this position. She's covering knight e2 check, and she's also covering queen g2, even though this feels very dangerous. And now you can't play this because the pawn can take. Queen's under attack and unprotected. How did I solve that problem? Undefended queen, weak king. Knight h4 just kind of screams itself. Okay, so rook check. Let's not make another stupid, mindless move like I did that one time. So there are several moves here. There's king g5. There's king takes h4, and there's pawn takes h4. Now if pawn takes h4, queen g2 check is mate. So pawn takes h4, definitely wrong. If king h5, king g5, pawn check, king takes, queen check, I would have to give up my rook to defend. So the only move I see is king takes h4. So king takes h4, there's g5 check. And if king takes g5, rook g7 check. And if king h4, queen h2 check. But then I can block. I can bring my queen back to h3. So in that position I survive. So king takes h4 seems to be the correct move. King takes h4, queen h2 check. I can also just play queen h3. Are there any other checks? King here, pawn check immediately. I can just take it. The rook is pinned to the king, so I don't actually have to worry about rook g7 check. There's queen d2 check. How about I just play my king back to g4? Rook takes g5 check. Let's just play king back to d4. And there are no follow-ups, so that I'm free to take on f7. So queen takes here. If queen h2 check, I'll play queen h3. If queen takes, king takes, rook takes f1, and I'm a rook up. And I can stop these two pawns here, so black is cut off from the queen side and will not make a passed pawn. There's only one move, king g4. I did consider that. I did consider g4 check to deflect, but I didn't consider it in that position. It is a good try, though, by black. Problem number 17, 44, 23. Mistakes made in this position, g takes h4 and king g5. So yeah, g takes h4, there's queen g2 checkmate, is what I said. And if king g5, I was more worried about h6 check, but the computer says queen d2 check. So now black wins the endgame. 2 pawns up. Alright. Next problem. This is going to be my last one for this session. There's a pin here. This is not checkmate. Queen f8 is not mate. I have king h7. So I could play a quiet move. For example, e5. Queen takes e5. I could also play bishop b5. Bishop b5 seems good. Bishop b5, rook d1 seems to defend. Uh, what about rook f6? King needs to stay. Queen needs to stay on a dark square, so queen e5 or queen h2 is forced. Or king e3, queen e3. e5. e5. e5, queen takes. Rook h1 check, king, queen check. Queen h2, no. What about combining the bishop b5 idea with the rook f6 idea? So bishop b5, rook d1, then rook f6, queen h2, or queen e5, rook takes f1, rook takes f1 or queen takes f1, then bishop takes e2, rook takes e2, and queen takes check. The problem I see that with that is bishop b5 and then protecting with rook f d1. Now after rook check here, or rook f6, bishop b5, rook f d1, rook f6, queen h2, or queen e3, or queen e5. Now what do I do? Damn. Rook f6, queen h2, or queen e5, rook takes, knight d2. Knight d2 doesn't seem to help. Yeah, I'm stumped. What about g4? g5 rather. If g5, then queen f8 check, king h7. Then he'll have e7. Queen e7 check. And if king h8, rook f8 checkmate. So that's no good. g5, bad idea. Well, darg nabbit. Bishop c5, rook fd1. Wait a second, after rook fd1, I can just take the bishop on... I can just take the knight on e2 for free. Why did I think that was a good defense? He needs to protect the rook here, but then after... Okay. So this is 2 pieces for the queen, or 2 pieces for the rook. Now, if I move this away, he will play... If I move it away, he's going to play... If I move it to h8, he'll play queen f8 check, king here, pawn check, king h6, queen check here, king h5, pawn check. I'm definitely getting mated there. So I should either play rook g6 or... Wait a second, he can't play queen f8. But what he can play is queen f7. So rook here, queen f7, king h7. Rook g6. If rook h5, queen check, king h7, and then queen picks up on h5. So my 2 options are either h8. if h7, queen check, king h8, and then queen check here is mates. Rook takes f8, mate. So if rook h8, queen f7, king h7, queen h5 is a perpetual. So my only option is king g6, or rook g6. To meet rook g6, queen f7 check, king h7. And then there are no mates. So the computer's saying just let him take queen check, and then take the rook on f1. I thought it was going to be more accurate to defend. No? So the point is bishop takes e2, pawn takes here, queen takes check. King moves away. And then just take on f1. Is the point, I guess. I hope that nobody actually watched me solve that whole problem. That would be depressing. Wrong moves made in this position, e5. e5 was a move that I spent a long time considering, but I eventually dismissed it because I couldn't figure out how to make it work. I also considered rook f6. But yeah, I just couldn't get these moves to work. Bishop c5 was like the second move that why do I keep on calling this square c5? Bishop b5 was the second move that I saw. But it took me a while to figure out how it works. So weak light squares. So weak, in fact, that I think I can take here, queen takes, and then play queen h3. And white cannot solve his light square problems. I'm threatening bishop takes h3 or bishop h3 somehow. He needs to play bishop g4 to stop mates. And then I just play bishop e4, threatening mate on h1 and mate on g2. That's a long play. So rook takes d6, queen takes d6, queen f3. If bishop takes g3, he'll just play f3. But then I could take on b1. Or b2 rather. Maybe that's the problem. Rook takes here, queen takes, and then queen takes b2. But I don't know, queen f3 looks really persuasive. But maybe that's not the solution because the knight can get to e3. So for example, rook takes, queen f3, knight d1, bishop h3, and then knight e3 would defend. But what if I play bishop e4 instead? Rook takes, queen f3, knight d1, queen e4, bishop e4, threatening mate on h1 and mate on g2. Rook takes, queen f3, threatening bishop e4. If rook e1, I play bishop takes h3. If g4, I play bishop e4. Okay, yeah, it was too dangerous. So instead, I just win the full piece. Most common mistake made in this position, bishop takes h3. But this can be blocked. Although I suppose then you take on b2. What's the correct response to this? Oh, bishop takes h3, knight takes b7. Duh. I spent so long calculating and not realizing that my queen was under attack. I just didn't even think about it. It wasn't something that occurred to me in the position because I just immediately saw the weak light squares, which immediately lent itself to rook takes d6, stopping the queen from defending the light squares. So I never really, when I was calculating, the knight was always off the board. So I never even considered knight takes b7 as a part of the problem. Anyway, I think that was a very good problem. People are rating it lowly. But yeah, I think that's an excellent problem. So this knight is pinned to that knight. So if knight a5, knight takes a5, queen takes e2 check. If the king goes to the back rank, I can play queen e1 check, picking up the knight on a5. And if the king goes to h3, I can play what? I can play queen f1 check, king g2, and queen e1 check, picking up the knight on a5. Knight takes d5, mistake made in this position. The automatic recapture. Yeah, it's fine, I guess, but it's not winning. Three against three. Isolated, isolated, isolated. You probably have a small endgame advantage as black, but you're not winning. Wow. Where is the checkmate here? So there's knight g5. Threatening queen h3 check, king g1, knight f3 check, when the queen would have to give herself up for mates, but then mate would follow again after f3, and then mate would be on g2. That's one way to get things done. So after knight g5, g4, queen takes g4 check, king h1, queen g3. There's no way to stop mate on h2. The queen would have to take the rook on e5 to defend the h2 square, but then I would just take. And yes, black is, or rather white is 2 rooks for the queen, but my mate's attack will continue. I'm still going to give mate. There's also knight h4 check, but after pawn g4, queen check, queen g3, I don't see what to do. Nope. Oh, queen h3 check is the move. Ah, and then rook takes h2 mates. Ah. Damn. Fair enough. Fair enough. Alright, you already saw the mistake that I made in that position. That's going to be it for this session. Yeah, that'll be it for this session, and we'll work on another set another time. Until then, thank you so much for joining me doing tactics on chesstempo.com, and good luck with your chess journey until we meet again. Goodbye.